Hello, my name is Allison Bukowski. I am a practicum student in EDAD 510, and this is my first observation. I'm sitting here with Pamela Ferris, who is an 8th grade ELA teacher, and we will be conducting a formal observation. So this is the beginning of her pre-conference. Hi, Ms. Ferris. How are you doing this morning?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Can you tell me the objectives that you will be covering in the lesson that I will be observing?
We will be doing 8.9a, explain the 8.8e, identifying the claim and analyzing the argument.
Okay. And is there any information that you expect the students to know, like prerequisite information, before the lesson?
They will need to know the term claim.
Okay.
And argument, counter argument, which we have gone over with vocab 2 days ago.
Okay. So there was some pre-teaching that happened before this. Okay, to prepare the lesson. Awesome. And where does this lesson fall in your unit plan?
This is day 3.
Day 3. Okay.
Unit 4.
Day 3. And what is the unit?
Argumentative text.
Okay. And is there any other skills that the students have to know to be successful for the lesson today?
Reading, comprehension skills,
okay.
Identifying ideal words in the text.
Okay. And then are there any students that required some type of varied learning? So do you have any students that are 504, have special ed accommodations, any of that?
There are special ed in that class period, in 5th period,
okay.
And also some 504 students.
Okay, but you are aware of what those accommodations are?
Correct.
Okay, and you've made modifications to the lesson?
Yes.
Perfect. And how do you plan to differentiate your instruction?
So we will be reading with partner, so I have them grouped as high-low.
Okay.
So they'll be reading with a partner. And then a few might be working with the TA in the classroom.
Perfect. And how did you determine if the students were high or if they were low?
Based on their benchmark scores.
Okay. So you use data to determine that?
Yes.
Good. Okay. And so you kind of touched on the grouping, so they'll be in partners or with a TA. Is that standard for your classroom?
Depending on the assignment, yes.
Okay. And then will they be grouped that way the entire time that I'm here?
No, some things they will be doing independent.
Okay, so will they start independent, go to a group, and then come back independent to wrap up?
They will read together with a partner and then work on the assignment independent.
Okay, perfect. And then how will you assess if they met the objectives?
They will be pointing out the argument and counter argument, finding evidence to go along with that in the assignment. We will also be having discussion.
Will that be a whole class discussion?
It will be a whole class discussion.
Okay, good. And is there anything special you want me to know about this class?
I do have 3 students in there. I think one will be absent, but 2 of them, they are a little hyper.
Okay. Is there anything special you want to point out that you specifically want me to see?
I want you to notice when one of my goals I'm working on is paying attention to students who aren't actively participating.
Okay. Good. And what do you plan for your lesson closure? How do you plan to wrap it up at the end?
We will be going over the closing it up by making sure that they understood the claim, counterclaim in the text.
So retouching the vocab. And then ensuring that they have found where the evidence is.
In the text, yes.
Got it. Perfect. And is there anything else you'd like to go over before I make your formal observation?
I believe that is all.
Okay. Thank you.
Good letter.
We are here with Miss Ferris, who teaches 8th grade ELA. We just watched her formal observation, and now we will be beginning her post-conference. All right, Miss Ferris. So how do you think your lesson went today?
I think some of the students were a little distracted. We got a little carried away with our debate on some part of it, but I think we were able to focus back in and get what we needed to do done with the lesson.
Good. And that debate was part of your warm-up experience? Yes. Good. And so let's talk about those students. How do you typically handle those individuals? Do you typically use like proximity control? Do you like to kind of remove them from the situation, like move their seating around? How do you typically handle them?
So depending on the student, sometimes if you walk closer to them, they definitely do shapen up. Sometimes it's just a nonverbal cue that it will give.
And they kind of pick up on that.
And they kind of pick up on those cues.
Okay. So you've kind of established those relationships with your students where they kind of, they figure it out.
Yes,
okay.
They know.
Good. And then I noticed you didn't mention in your pre-conference, but I did notice that you had an aide come in. Can you tell me kind of about what her role is in your classroom?
So she is in there to support the special ed students.
Okay.
So we do have about 5 students in there that need services.
Okay. So she's requiring, or she's using that inclusion time?
Yes.
Okay. So something that I wanted to talk to you about, I really enjoyed that warm-up. I know that it took quite a bit of time out of the beginning, but I like the way you gave the students an opportunity to like work independently with a topic that they could get passionate about while you did like your administrative things. I think you were like taking attendance and making sure all the students were there and that kind of stuff. And I liked it. And then you turning it into a debate style where that kinetic learning happened because they were able to move across the room to determine which side of the fence per se that they were on. I really like that. And you could tell that some of your reluctant learners were excited to be engaged and be a part of that. So I really appreciate you hitting some of those kids a little bit differently. Something that I did want to talk about was when you were clicking through vocab, there was lots of like, I don't want to call them like side conversations, but like not as engagedness. And I feel like if you used the fundamental 5 principle where you're in the power zone, where you're like walking around, and it'll help to like use that proximity control to manage that behavior. But then by you moving around, and then maybe if you had a remote that you could like click through slides while you were walking, it would keep the kids kind of more engaged because they know like she's coming and got to make sure I get it, get with it. But other than that, the worksheet that you used, the guided notes, I thought was really great. They were very interactive. The definitions weren't long. I really appreciated that when you were talking about vocab words, you were reviewing the vocab for the independent reading that they did, or the group reading, which is another fundamental 5 principle that you demonstrated really well. Awesome job for that. But you talked about trend. And so you had a specific student and you told them the entire time, like, I have a specific word that I want you to read. And that was really cool because that student felt like validated and that they were important, that you wanted them to do that. So I thought that was really cool for that one word. But then when talking about trends, you kind of related it back to who they are as an individual, and you asked them like, what's a trend that you like, or what's a trend you can think of that's like happening right now? And you were able to utilize that so that way they could connect that word with something real world. And I think that's really important for them. So that was really awesome. Like, shout out for that. Really loved that. And then there was one student in particular that you kept like calling like, hey, like, bring it back, bring it back, bring it back. And I feel like if you would have just like sat him closer to you, then you could have just been like, and it would have been fine. But I felt like you just kept saying, bring it back. It was Juan.
Oh, yes, Juan. He is of his own character.
Yes. Well, he was very excited to participate, but it was just very interesting. And then I noticed that you used technology a lot interactively, those guided notes. Are the guided notes the same for all the students in the class, or do the special ed students have a different version of those notes?
They all get the same.
Okay.
It's the same, yeah.
Perfect. And then you used both whole class discussion, small group discussion, and then you even had your TA discussing with students. I thought that was really awesome. And then you provided a separate reading material for them to like hold on to, read as a group, read together. So I really thought that was awesome. One thing that I thought that your lesson was missing that I think could really just like take you next level would be like some type of lesson closure, maybe like the introduction of an exit ticket. Because I feel like it'll help the students to really like wrap in like what you're trying to go over. So even if it was like an opportunity, so like for them to define in their own words like one of the vocab words that we covered today. Like even one of the students brought up like paleontologist. You like simply defined the word after they read the textbook definition. And I feel like if they had an opportunity to do that with all of the words, then they would have a better understanding. So maybe in that exit ticket, just be like, hey, define this word in 5 words or less, and give them like one of the words, like bitter or decor or one of those. But I think that like that would wrap your lesson up really well and just like put a nice neat bow on it. And I think it would help to connect those words with them a little better. But other than that, you did an awesome job.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me come and watch your class.
Of course, anytime.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna edit this first part out. Oh yeah, that'll be perfect. We have to pull up the pre-conference question. Because those are the questions that I have. Okay. Good enough. Make it by yourself. Also, I think my scripting notes are hilarious because I just write things in random places. Okay. How are you?
Are we videoing yet?
Yeah. Well, it's recording, so we don't have to.
Well, I'm fine.
Good.
Just flew back in from a job trip.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So I had my formal observation with Miss Ferris.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to kind of go over what I got from her pre-conference, what I observed, and then things we discussed, like improvements we discussed in her post-conference. So during the pre-conference, I asked just the standard campus questions that we ask during pre-conferences. So we went over what her objectives are, what she expected the students to know, what lesson in her unit plan it was, and so it was part of day 3, unit 4. The prerequisite skills to be successful, she mentioned, was reading comprehension. I asked if there were any students that required varied learning. She didn't mention students specifically, but she just mentioned how she was going to kind of scaffold her lesson to hit each of those levels of students. And then she mentioned that there were special accommodations for 504 kids because she did have an inclusion teacher during that class period. Miss Kerr was with her. And then I also asked how she planned to differentiate instruction. And so they were, during the lesson, they were partner pair reading. So she paired higher performing kids with lower performing kids, and that was all based off of their benchmark data. And then how she planned to assess the met objectives is with evidence of the class discussion. And then anything special she wanted me to see, there were 3 students that she mentioned by name that she wanted me to watch for, because there were days that they were reluctant learners, but she felt like she had gained enough relationship with them at that point that she felt like they would perform well for her. And then I asked what her lesson closure plan was, and she said she didn't quite have one yet. And so that was kind of where I focused her post-conference on after I observed her. And then any special circumstances, she just mentioned that she does have an inclusion teacher during that class period, and that was really all that she mentioned in her post-conference.
In her pre-conference?
Yes, pre-conference, sorry. That was actually the first pre-conference I've ever had with someone. And so Miss Ferris isn't one to like really elaborate. She's just going to give you very like clear-cut answers of like what she's going to do in black and white. So I thought that went well, but I'm not sure how that would look with a different teacher. Like to keep them on track to ensure that they actually answer the question instead of going off. Does that happen often?
In the pre-conferencing?
Yes.
I have them answer the questions ahead of time. And then when they come to actually meet together, I pull open their answers and we discuss each one of them.
Okay, so then it kind of prevents that
Yeah.
conversation from skewing elsewhere. Okay, that makes sense. Cool. Okay, and then so during the actual lesson, so I was there for the whole class period. So I witnessed from the time students entered until the time students exit. So it was the full 50 minutes. And so it was 5th period, which is an interesting period for 8th grade because I feel like they're still on like their lunch excitement. But she had the students, when the students came in, they took an index card, and so they did their like warm-up activity using this index card. And so it took her 4 minutes to kind of like take attendance and do that kind of stuff before they finally started. She did have that warm-up question on the board, and it was relevant to the lesson later on, but it was interesting to see when I first came in. So their question was, every house should have a pet. List 3 reasons why or why not.
Oh.
And so her lesson focused on arguments and like choosing a side and providing evidence for your argument. So I actually thought it went really well. And then while they were working on those warm-ups, she was taking attendance but still kind of checking in. And then Miss Kerr was walking around checking in with each student, making sure they were like getting their stuff done. And I wrote down that relatively all the students were working. There were minor distractions, in the beginning of the class period they were transitioning in. And she used a lot of nonverbal redirection, which I thought was really helpful to not be distracting to the kids that are easily distracted, that were actually working.
Oh, what kinds of things did she do?
She was working, she was at her workspace, but she would like look up and make a facial expression at a specific student, and I am assuming from the relationship that they built, they knew that they were in the wrong based on her just nonverbal. And so they quit what they were doing and got back on task. So I thought that was really effective, and it just showed the rapport that she has with those kids, which is helpful, especially with those 3 students that she mentioned attempting to build relationships with. So it was really good. And then she used kinetic learning to kind of round out the warm-up question after she did that. So she had all the students stand up, and then she assigned a side. So if you thought every house should have a pet, you come to one side. If you don't think, you come to the other side. So it gave the students an opportunity to like burn just a little bit more energy that they already had.
The thing to do after lunch.
Yes, yeah. And then it got really intense. It was really honestly awesome to see, because students that I know are reluctant learners, I got to watch them like really get excited about a topic. And so I thought that was an awesome way to start a lesson.
Absolutely.
And there was not a single child that was off task. Like they were all engaged, they were all participating. It was very good. And then they just continued to discuss. They gave their arguments, they gave evidence, they gave like real world scenarios of what could happen, possibilities of things that might happen. They brought in like their own like connections to the argument. So like, oh, well, we can't have a dog because, or we have a cat because. And so it was just really cool to like watch their brains work and then make those connections with a teak or a topic that could be perceived as boring. but her lesson was so engaging and so active, and that was just the first like 10 minutes.
Wow.
So it was super cool.
That
So I
is
was
good.
very excited for the rest of the lesson. And so once they finished with that, they kind of winded down a little bit and went through guided notes. And so she had slides. They were going through vocabulary before they went into a guided reading. And so they took guided notes. She was monitoring what they were writing. They were writing in a booklet that they had been working on, like a notebook for the semester that had all of their reference terms too. And they were talking about
On the different genres? Or
yeah,
was it just an argumentative?
no, it was split into the different genres, and then within the genre was the argumentative. And so they were defining words that were in the text that they were about to read that was argumentative in nature.
I've seen that booklet.
Okay.
That's a nice tool.
It was a great resource.
Yeah.
I should have asked in her post-conference if that was something she made or something she found, but it seemed to work really well. And then Miss Kerr was sitting with two students, and she was writing the notes as well, so that way she was modeling that behavior for those students. And then while they were talking about those vocab words, she was providing real-world examples to kind of help them relate those words to things that they're used to seeing. And then I just wrote down that she has great student-teacher relationships. Like, you can see that she really knows who her kids are, knows what makes them tick, knows how to get them to learn something. And so that was really, really awesome. Sorry, I'm just reviewing what I wrote down.
No, it's okay.
She also asked a lot of great probing questions when talking about those vocab words that they were going to see in their reading. She was asking questions that kind of helped them to make those connections, that even if that real world example didn't get it, those probing questions were going to help to make that connection for them.
That's good.
So some of the vocab words that so once we moved from the argumentative vocab, we moved into vocab that they were going to see in the reading that they were going to do. And so some of those words were auction, bitter, decor, Galapagos Island, which is interesting because I obviously know that word, but I don't think I've ever read that word. So I think that would be very intimidating, even on an assessment or in a reading, come across that word.
Yeah, it's different.
Yes. Another one was paleontologist in trend, and so she had some really good, she had really good real world examples of trend. She talked about a hydro flask with trend because that's the new trendy thing for them, and that was all something they'd seen. They could list a classmate that had one, and so it was good because now they understand what that word means.
Yeah.
And then I wrote down that she had a great use of technology, guided notes, discussion, and reading materials. So then once they went over that vocab for the pre-reading, then they went into that guided reading where she had them grouped by ability. So she had the higher achieving students grouped with the lower achieving students, and together they read an article that was about the Galapagos Island and paleontologists, and about how it was actually very interesting how they took artifacts from the Galapagos and they sold them in an auction.
Oh,
Yeah,
that is interesting.
and so the kids really enjoyed it.
I know. What was she doing? Did she pull her own group?
Yes, she did.
Okay.
She pulled 3 students that she these were the same 3 students that she identified. She pulled them. Miss Kerr had a small group with her, and then they were grouped.
Good.
So she worked with them to make sure that they got through the reading. But before she sat down with them, she went and checked in with each of the groups, and then she sat down with her small group.
Good.
Yes, it was very good. And then the students were engaged. They really liked the reading that she chose. And then I did write down that she needed to have something for early finishers, because there was one student in particular that I knew was her high achieving student that she paired, and just her reading ability, they got through their reading really quickly. And so I wrote down that maybe having something else for her to do would kind of help, even to help, because I know something that we're focusing on a lot right now is taking our kids from meets to masters. And so if there's something small that she could do that could just help her get just like a little bit closer from meets to masters,
Absolutely, yeah.
it would help a lot. And then the last thing I wrote down is that she needs kind of like a lesson wrap up, because as soon as they finish that reading, the bell rang. And so like they went through the reading, they discussed kind of what happened, but then it was just like
No closure for the period.
Yes, that was it.
Yes. We're seeing that campus wide, and we don't know why that's happening. We don't know if it's that people are just losing track of time, or they're just getting away from the traditional lesson cycle, but the closure is so much needed.
Yeah.
So in the pre-conference, she said she didn't have an idea for ticket out the door. Did she ever do anything then?
No,
she
like
didn't.
the bell literally
Rang. Okay.
And so during her post-conference, that was the suggestion I made. So I praised her for her student relationships in her probing questions. I kind of Oreoed those with my suggestion of needing exit ticket, just because those students need to be able to like kind of reflect on, because they went through a lot of material in 50 minutes. So like that opportunity for them to kind of like digest, think through, and kind of make the bow around that lesson.
It would have been a great formative assessment for her, so she would have known who got it and who didn't.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a lost opportunity there. Otherwise, it sounded like she did it through maybe the small group or the observations, but the ticket out the door or some sort of activity would have really solidified who understood the material.
That's interesting that you say that's been like a campus-wide issue. I wonder if that's because we, like in the last 3 years, have gone from longer, so like significantly longer class periods to shorter class periods. I wonder if that is kind of where that like 5 minutes went that we would use to wrap lessons. And
I don't know. I
lessons
also
weren't
thought
modified.
maybe during COVID, when they were cleaning their desks right before the bell rang, and then not being able to sit back at their desks. I know that we had to really reverse that because kids were still getting up and lining up at the door. We hate to see that.
Yes.
But it's just the whole closure, even a verbal, like, okay, can anybody tell us what we did today? Or can you tell us, did we meet our objective? Because our objective should have been on the board.
Yes,
so,
which it was. I wrote it. Even like, did we accomplish the I will? Like, that was our goal for today. Do you feel like you accomplished it? Even if you did raise a finger for your level.
That would have been
of
easy formative assessment.
Yeah. Or even as they're walking out the door, kind of like check in. You got it? You good? You need more? Okay, you need more. Got it.
Absolutely, yes.
So that was the only real major thing that I felt like could have been improvement. But I mean, at the same time, like, yes, it's a formal observation, but it's just one day in her class. It's not like that's an everyday regular occurrence. But I'd be interested to see in a walkthrough experience, like, if that's a continual issue, like if she's continuing to not wrap up those lessons, or if it would just happen to be that day, which it definitely could have been, because I think her warm-up took a lot more time than she was anticipating. But when the kids were engaged at that level, it's hard not to continue to let them just work and let their brains think. So I think that could have eaten at it, but she didn't have anything. She didn't mention she had something planned. So
did they read the lesson frame or write down the lesson frame, or did she reference it in any way?
Yes. So when they did that note card for their warm up question, they wrote it at the top.
Great.
Yes.
Great.
She has it written in the back. So that was part of the kinetic too, because they had to turn to look in the back where that lesson was written, and then they kind of turned forward to then do their warm up question. So.
Well, good.
Yeah, I thought she did a great job.
Anything you think you can take back to your own classroom?
The importance of the exit ticket. I do use exit tickets regularly, though.
Just the importance of the closure, right? Like, you don't realize until you're part of it how important that is to wrap it all up.
And my exit tickets are more, it's made me think about, like, what I'm using the exit tickets for, because a lot of mine focus on, like, personal growth instead of, like, what we learned in the lesson. So I really think that's something that I could, like, modify to be more lesson centered than like reflective.
Oh,
Like I
yeah,
use mine
yeah.
more as a reflective opportunity instead of did you get what I was telling you?
Sure.
Because I use the warm up usually for that. So the way that works is like my warm up for the following day is about what we talked about the previous day. And so that's my opportunity to be like, did you get it? Do you know what I need you to know? But if I shifted that over and made that the exit ticket instead of giving them a reflective opportunity at the end, I think it could help for sure.
You should see.
Definitely would be interesting. So, anything else?
When you post conferenced with her, did she bring anything to your attention that you may have missed?
She asked if I noticed behavior from a specific student,
Mm-hmm.
and I did write that student's name down, and I just offered the suggestion of moving that student closer to her, just for proximity control. But she mentioned that the 3 students she already talked about have to sit so close to her for that
Oh, I
same
see.
purpose.
Yeah.
And so,
Did you see him misbehaving or off task?
I wouldn't say that he was misbehaving. I did notice that he was off task a couple times, but he wasn't like disruptive. He was just not doing exactly what she wanted him to do at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if she would have like stopped what she was doing to address him, then it would have caused more of a disruption than
Right.
the little tinkering that he was doing. But she could have solved it with just proximity control, just walking over there.
Mm-hmm.
But she was kind of stuck at her desk to click the slides for the notes, for the vocab, because she was like underlining and clicking, and so she was almost like
Did you
stuck
show
where
her
she
how
was.
to hook up her laptop wirelessly so she could?
She doesn't use her laptop, which I thought was interesting.
That is interesting.
I also think something we could look into, as crazy as this sounds, is a clicker. Because I feel like it could solve so many problems.
Oh no, there's been some teachers that the library has bought those for.
Really?
Yes.
I've never seen, in my walkthroughs and stuff, like I've never seen them.
Let's put that up on the leadership agenda for next week, and let's talk about
Okay.
if there is a school-wide need for that, then that needs to be like on a long-term needs assessment, because
I have one that
I agree
love.
with you. I think that she shouldn't have to be walking back to do that.
Well, because then you're not tied, and like the one that I have has a laser on it, so I can point to a specific like word or phrase on the board, and then I can click through any slide I need to. I didn't even think about.
It's for the projector or for the computer?
No, it's a USB that you plug into your computer.
Yeah, it's like a dongle. Or,
Mhm.
okay.
And they sell them on Amazon. The one that I have, I think, was only like $10.
Oh, so we could do that easily. Good. All
So
right.
another problem.
That's right.
But other than that, I think she did great.
Good. She's a strong teacher.
Yes, I thought I was able to give her some valuable feedback, and I look forward to going back in there in a walkthrough, seeing if maybe she took any of that feedback and made some adjustments, or if maybe she does often use lesson closures and it was just that one day
Could have been.
she missed
Could have
it.
been.
So
Yeah.
interested to see her again. So
Good. Go back and let's see what you find.
awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. Thank you for your work.
Hello, my name is Allison Bukowski. This is my personal reflection on the formal observation that I previously conducted over Miss Ferris's 8th grade English class. This was honestly a really unique opportunity to do because as I've done walkthroughs before, I've never gotten the opportunity to go through a full formal observation process. So getting to go through and kind of be coached by my principal through the pre-conference and what those questions need to look like as far as like our district expectations, as well as our district expectations and our campus expectations. aligning those questions to ensure that I'm asking what the T-test is looking for and what the campus needs to know. So that was a really interesting and unique opportunity. I thought I did a pretty decent job conducting that pre-conference with Miss Ferris. I honestly wish I would have asked a few more in-depth questions and kind of probed her for more answers to some of my questions, and maybe a little bit of longer answers. But knowing Miss Ferris's personality, she's very cut and dry and very black and white with her answers. So she's just gonna straight answer the question. She's not one to give you this elaborate answer to go with each question, which is okay, and so is being straightforward with your answers. But I just wish I would have gotten a little bit more information from her. So I definitely think that some improvement to my pre-conference experience would be kind of focusing on that, making sure that I get the full, complete answer that I need and that I'm looking for, to ensure I'm catching everything that is needed for me to see in that observation. When it comes to the observation itself, as far as my scripted notes, I think if I had a template to follow as far as what I was scripting, it would be a little more conducive to kind of providing feedback. I think I did when it came to providing feedback, which I'll talk about later, but I think I did a decent job. But when it came to my scripted notes, they're kind of the way that my brain works and not in a way that's easy for a reader to read. Not that most people will, but as far as the way that our administration on my campus works, they do read other formal observations just to see if what the formal observation saw and some of the issues that they see are things that maybe others have seen in their walkthroughs. And so having a template for my walkthrough notes or my formal observation notes would be super helpful. I do know that my campus uses an online platform to do that, but I wasn't able to gain access to that platform. But I did use the questions that the platform asked for when doing my scripted notes. But I think just the digital ability to type that information would be more conducive than just like longhand scripting everything, just because it's really easy to miss something if you're just concentrated on writing everything down. I did write quite a few information, and I wrote just a few messages to myself. I really liked that, which I didn't mention in my reflection with my principal, but the department has their goal posted in the classroom. And so the department goal aligns with the campus goal, which aligns with the district goal. And so that goal is actually written, it's posted on the wall, so that way the teacher sees it regularly to hold themselves personally accountable, but then the students can also see like what the campus, what the English department expects of them and kind of where they would like for them to be. And so I think that's a really good way to kind of keep everyone on the same page of like where we want to be, because I think sometimes that is lost sight of. And so having that posted where it can be seen every day, multiple times a day, multiple class periods, I think it's really great. And then the students, once they notice it, they kind of take accountability for it, and then they'll ask you about it. Like, hey, this is the department goal. Are we getting close? Are we almost there? Do you think we're going to reach it? And so I think it's just really cool. I also wrote down that there were students that once the notes started, that they kind of moved to the front. And I didn't want to, in the post-conference, point out too many things that I noticed, because I know that when a principal is leading learning, they have to start somewhere, and you don't want to overwhelm the teacher that you're observing with all of these things that you think that they could change, but by starting with one thing. So one of the other things that I noticed that I didn't mention in the post-conference was that first, that there were a lot of students moving to sit like on the floor in the front of the classroom so they could see the board. And I'm not sure if that is part of their accommodations, that they need to be sat closer to the board, or if they're just having trouble seeing, or if the classroom is too dark that they can't read what they need to, or even if the presentations, just like the coloring, is hard for them to see. So I definitely think that if throughout my walkthroughs, if I continue to see that in different groups of students, I think I might mention that to her and kind of dig a little deeper and ask why that might be happening. I know that sometimes it is just student preference. Sometimes they're more comfortable doing that. But I just want to make sure that that teacher is noticing that and asking questions to make sure that she or we are not missing anything when it comes to that student. If they are needing services or struggling with vision or something like that, and we're not, and maybe we need to touch base with their parents to ensure that they're doing all right. But that was another thing that I would like to look forward to in the future, or it could be added into her future goals. Another one that I wrote down is her bathroom policy. Throughout, I would like to ask her at some point when we could conference again about what her bathroom policy is, because I noticed that there were multiple times within the lesson that students were coming up interrupting what she was saying or what she was doing, especially when she was working in small group, to ask to go to the restroom. And so I really would like to look into that with her and see if maybe there's some other way that students can still utilize the restroom, but not interrupt that very important small group time that she's doing, because I know that sometimes that small group instruction counts for intervention hours. So it's super important that those students get that time and get what those services and stuff that they need. So I really would like to look into what her bathroom policy is, and maybe if she doesn't have one, help her to develop and implement one, just to kind of help her classroom just keep moving smoothly. I mentioned when I was talking to Miss Garcia, my principal, that her classroom ran fairly well, that I thoroughly enjoyed the lesson. There was just little bitty tweaks that could help. But one of the main things that we're working on our campus is taking our students from meets to masters. And it seems insane that a bathroom policy could change that. But if a student gets just 30 more seconds every single day of intense, uninterrupted either instruction or intervention, that could be what takes them from approaches to meets, or what takes them from meets to masters. And so that little bit of time adds up, and it starts to be pivotal when we're getting into our stuff. So I think that that is also something that could be brought up. But like I said, I felt like in that post-conference that the exit ticket and the lesson wrap-up was the most important piece at that time. And so another thing was that I mentioned that she should move a particular student just closer to her to use that proximity control. And I mentioned that too when I was talking to Miss Garcia. But those were two other things that I noticed that I thought could really help her to grow and to just take her to that next level of teaching. But I didn't want to overwhelm her and bombard her with all of these different things that I thought that she could change or implement or do better within her classroom. But it's definitely something that if other administrators or myself continues to see those types of interruptions happening during our walkthroughs and during other formal observations, then I really think that that's something that I would like to address with her as well. And then in the post-conference, my biggest suggestion to her was to implement a lesson closure or an exit ticket. And I think this is good to just kind of wrap up the learning, and it helps teachers to informally understand where their students are at. Well, it could be formal or informal, but it helps to just get them to understand what the student's level of understanding is, especially when they're learning something new. And the lesson that I observed, students were learning something new. It was only day 3 in the unit, and so it was really early on. And those really early days within the units are jam-packed with learning, and so I want to make sure that those students, if they are struggling, that's caught early so interventions can happen before we get into day like 12 and 13 of the unit when we're starting to approach assessment time. But they missed that pivotal information, or that good solid foundational understanding in the beginning, and so it wasn't able to be caught. So I definitely think that using those lesson wrap-ups and those lesson closures would be super important. Also during the post-conference, I used the like Oreo, I don't know what the formal name of it, but where I went to her with some positives that I witnessed, and then I told her something that I thought she could benefit from in her classroom, and then I finished out with more positives that I saw, because during an observation, or especially a formal observation, that's only one day in her classroom. Teachers teach for 180 or 179 more days than that one day that I'm in there to formally observe, and so I want teachers to understand that. I get it. If you're struggling because your technology is not working, if you're struggling because this one kid decides to be more ornery than normal, I get that, and so I don't want to penalize them for that, but there are so there's obviously things that I can praise them on, but there's obviously some improvement that can be happening, and that's just part of being a teacher. Teaching is an art, and so we have to continue to work on it and develop our teaching and develop ourselves to continue to be great. And then I just asked her to be reflective about it. I just asked her open-ended question to see what she thought it was, and how she felt, and like how she felt that it went. And like I said in the pre-conference, she's not a teacher that's going to give you this long, elaborate answer. She's going to be very straightforward with how she thought. And I honestly think that she's going to be receptive to the suggestions that I made, but I definitely look forward to going through her classroom again in a walkthrough setting to see if she took my suggestions to heart and if she's implementing those things. So I really think this was a valuable experience, and I look forward to conducting more.